Welcome to the Physician's Guide to Doctoring, a practical guide for practicing physicians. Dr. Bradley Block interviews experts in and out of medicine to find out everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. The ideas expressed on this podcast are those of the interviewer and interviewee and do not represent those of their respective employers. And now, here's Dr. Bradley Block.
And now a word from this week's sponsor, Laurel Road.
Since I had my son, paying down my med school debt has become my top priority. I remember holding him in my arms for the first time, looking into his beautiful little face, and just wanting the best future for him. With the Laurel Road Student Loan Cashback Card, my regular purchases earn me 2% cashback when I use it to pay down my student loans, which helps me reach my goals faster and plan for my family's future.
Laurel Road for Doctors. Banking, insights, and benefits uniquely designed for doctors. See laurelroad.com/doctor checking for full terms and conditions. Laurel Road is a brand of KeyBank N.A. member FDIC.
Dr. Simon Maltais, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Hi, Brad. Thank you for having me.
So what we're going to start with is your explanation of why you decided to go into cardiac surgery, because I've heard you discuss this before, and I think it gives a good window into who you are, right? The type of person you are, or maybe who you were and not who you are currently. So let's start out with that. Why did you choose cardiac surgery?
Well, I think I've explained that before, but I wasn't just going to go in medicine. I wasn't just going to go in surgery. I was going to go in the absolute best specialty, or the highest sort of intensity specialty I could get in. And it kind of fits in. So I applied in neurosurgery, which I actually started to start with, and then went to cardiac surgery for sort of personal reasons. But yeah, it sort of speaks to the drive, right? That constantly I had since high school, really, to always get to the top. I was president of the med school. I was the captain of the soccer team. I was going to be the heart surgeon, not just a heart surgeon, but I was going to do heart failure surgery. So it really was driven by a sense of accomplishment. And then a lot towards what people thought of me as opposed to what I really wanted to do. Okay, so
so using external cues, I guess, validation. Yeah, that's a better word, rather than internal validation to choose your specialty.
In some ways, I mean, of course, I was always driven by the physiology of the heart, the complexity and the technical abilities, but it was a lot driven by what others were how people were going to perceive me as a person treating those patients, and not by, as I said, the internal motivation to sort of really do something that perhaps would have fitted better my personality, so to speak.
So in retrospect, do you think you realized at the time that you were making the decision to choose that specialty from external validation?
Well, in some ways, I think as I said before, I really like the specialty, the challenges, the technical challenges of it. But I do feel a good part of the decision to go into heart surgery was driven by a sense of accomplishment, a sense of shining and sparkle, at the eyes of others, and to be in a field that was at the highest sort of intensity I could get into, so to speak.
And do you think you'd still make this decision now?
Maybe. I do feel like I've acquired a pretty good set of skills, and I feel like I'm really helping patients. I probably would tailor my choices to a lifestyle that would be fitting me a bit more. The reason why I'm saying that is heart surgery is heart surgery. It's really hard to get away from it. Meaning you can control your schedule, but there's a lot of emergencies. The patients are there. The cases are complex. And so, and more and more complex. And for that reason, I think, and my life at the moment is a balanced one where I value, a lot of other things sort of work. And so that specialty, while I can function with it pretty well right now, I feel is a stamp, pretty good stamp on my lifestyle. That's hard to get away from.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. So something from your bio kind of threw me off, right? So I'm just going to read it. It says, before 40, Maltais has raised to lead 2 world-renowned programs in his specialty and has pioneered numerous novel approaches for advanced cardiac surgery interventions. At the age of 35, he was among the youngest promoted associate professors at a nationally recognized institution. He's a frequent keynote speaker, has published more than 160 articles, and has contributed to numerous books. So, that sounds like the department chair that we all had that expects us to be as productive as them, right? But now you're speaking about work-life balance. That, it doesn't sound like balance to me. That sounds like,
No, I mean, it's sort of this, I felt like I was in a sprint, right? Constantly, that I was in a rat race, and was certainly not a marathon. And you're right. A lot of the historical, I'd say, images or models that we have are people that have accomplished that much. But I think I talk about this in the book, but really rarely these people that are usually president of the associations and committees and things that we look up to, if you look at those presidential addresses at the end of their year, they usually have these moments where they say, well, I want to thank everybody, and they do a little retrospective review of what they've accomplished. Most of them at the end will finish by their family by saying how lucky they are to have a supportive group of people they have not seen, and I think that's tragedy, to have models. I mean, heart surgery is pretty new specialty, still about 60 years in. So we still have a lot of those models. The only way to be a chair, or the only way to be at the top of an institution, is to have that type of CV. And in some ways, maybe I won't get to be a chair one day, but I was right up there in one of the busiest heart surgery program in the world. So I value, I think if I would have to choose a chair, I would want somebody that values family time and time away from work, and not the amount of paper. Thankfully, I think it is changing a little bit.
So how did you arrive at this revelation, right? Because at one point you were really gunning for this position. You weren't, and it sounds like chairman wasn't good enough. Like, you had to be chairman of like the top program in the country. And right. And then from there, right, what maybe, president of the hospital. And then, so where was the revelation there that you wanted more balance?
Well, it just started to add up. I mean, it just started to, the little stuff, right? The didn't want to go to work necessarily. Was always tired, always angry. The complications became a complication. I didn't care as much. The lack of empathy for the patient. So little signs of depression, and that became really good sign of depression. And little failures as well at work. Frequent visit to HR, not being really fired, but asked to think about the long-term plan.
Was this while you were at Vanderbilt?
No, I left Vanderbilt for the Mayo Clinic, because at the time, Mayo Clinic, it was sort of this, I had trained there. And so it was the best place in the world to do medicine. So it was a great promotion. But I was never, for so to speak, fired from a place, but there was always these struggles to function, right? Although I was super busy, there was some professional challenges, some colleagues being angry, and I was angry at some people. The outcomes were good, but it was just not a easy travel through through work. While a lot of people liked me, a lot of people hated me.
It's interesting that the reason I ask about Vanderbilt is because about a year ago, I had William O. Cooper on the show, and he runs the coworker observation reporting system at Vanderbilt, which is where they have these this anonymous reporting system.
Yep.
Right. And it sounds like that was, so is that what you're referring to?
No, I mean, some of them are anonymous, some of them are not so anonymous.
Okay.
A lot of the hospitals have this ability to report stuff, right? Most of them have now, and that's a tragedy too, but that's a different type conversation. I can't recall how they called it then, but every hospital has a name for it. Basically, for those listening, it's a system for which you can report someone or something anonymously within the hospital, and then your chairman gets a letter, and then the HR gets a letter, and then you sort of call to speak about it. And so, I mean, I had some of those, and then I guess the relation that they found in the hospitals is if you have more than a certain amount a year, it puts the hospital at risk of lawsuits and things like that. And so it's a way to track, collaboration and people's work through the system. So, but yeah, I did have some of those. Most of those weren't like, say these fireable things, like the big 4 or 5 things you get fired from, but they were like angry stuff or things you've talked to people that way. But they are serious stuff. I mean, it's not like you should treat people a certain way, but I was so anxious. I was so, I'd say, depressed about work. I was so like focused on Simon that I forgot that a lot of the things I did were driven by the people around me, and that they made me who I was at the moment, meaning leading a growing heart transplant program.
So then where was that revelation, right? You had said like you were angry, and it sounds like it wasn't that, as driven as you were and successful as you weren't maybe thriving as much as you expected to.
No, exactly. And then some doors were closing at work. So that's one point. And then personally, I was drinking more. I got through divorce. I had financial issues. A lot of these things started to add up. And while they all seem separate, they all sort of were related to what I talked about in the book, what I described to be healthcare disease. So basically, a person within the system that has this chronic misadapted process with the work, and whether it's driven by models or personality traits or external pressures that you can't really control. I was at a point where I thought, well, I should be at that point in my career, but then it seems like everybody's driving the opposite way. I'm accumulating personal and professional failures, and so something's got to give, and something gave. I like to, I became this expression from Jim Carrey where I created this avatar of myself to function through life and work and family, where at some point I just couldn't. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, something had to change, because I was either going to drink myself to death, or I was going to lose jobs and or be by myself because nobody wanted to be around me. So I hit rock bottom, and I had a depression. I honestly just needed deep rest and sort of a refocus on where I was heading.
So it sounds like one of the takeaways is self-assessment, right? And so that's something you talk about in the book, right? Your virus scan.
Right.
So what is that?
I think it's an important step because people talk about mindfulness and the importance of sort of be present and things. I call it virus scanning, just, from the healthcare connotation of it. But I think you need to find a time every day to say to sort of stay out loud or write it down and say how I feel right now. And it could be tired, it could be anxious, it could be hungry, it could be, that you miss people. But it's important not just get through the system and be caught in the vortex, to take time for yourself. And maybe that if you feel like you're too anxious, that you have too much work to do, but maybe you do need to make an effort to slow it down, to decrease the number of cases, to make room in your schedule. There's this book that's called the Unicorn Space. So to create this space around yourself, and that means letting things go. If you do want to operate more, you can't do all the meetings, you can't do all the publications, you can't be the teacher. So there's some things got to give, and that's what I meant by that. And I would go even a bit further, and I don't think I described this in a book, but I give a lot of conferences, and people talk about this pie, right, every day, or in your life, right, the family, the community, the work, the health, the pie of things you have that are important to you. I think that pie needs to be a proactive one, meaning on a daily basis, assess how much time you spend in one quarter of that pie. And if you do have a lot of work, that happens. When you get home at 5, you shut everything off and you sort of switch by, whether it's going to the health club or whether it's spending time with your family and kids. So on a daily basis, try to balance that pie as opposed to do it on a 6 months time basis. I think that's something that helped me anyway.
That reminds me of a Kanye West lyric, right? I'm either getting, I don't know if this is appropriate for the audience, but well, whatever. This is my podcast. Either I'm getting paid or I'm getting laid. And it seems like when I'm getting one, the other one's getting away. So, right? So what you're saying is I've got these finite number of obligations, and each morning I need to assess which one I'm going to be devoting more energy to, because it's work-life balance, but it's fluid. Right. It's not that like, and it's day to day.
Right. And it's attaining a state of flow. I talked about this in the book, but it's getting to a state of flow in this high intensity environment. Because, the system is what it is. That, it's like holding a glass of water. The glass of water always has the same weight. And if you hold it for a long time, that's where it becomes real heavy. And so the system itself does not change, right? So there's constant things that you need to be aware of, the patients, the finances, the new policies, the whatever. So that comes at you. And so if you let yourself being sort of battled, one way and the other, and then get into this vortex, that's where you sort of lose focus. And I think it's that's why I talk in the book. It's refocusing it to be in control of it, to sort of be at the center of this storm, right? And the eye of the storm, to say, I control what's going on around me, whether it's schedule. I respect a lot one of the surgeons I did not get along with at the Mayo Clinic, who said, I'm going to do 1 case a day. That's it. 1 case a day. I'm going to be done by 2, but I'm going to be focused on that case. Most of us, all 9 of us, would do 3 or 4 cases. We would just go around and do many, many cases. And that's where the anxiety kind of gets created. Doing too much creates anxiety, and that's a proven fact. And so controlling the environment is what I think one of the key of this attaining, getting to flow state is.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I am, after my second son was born, I stopped working weekends, and I was like, yeah, when he's sleeping through the night, I'll start working weekends again. And most of my practice is outpatient. I'm not doing, high acuity stuff, unless I'm on call. And then, he's 4.5 and I'm still not working weekends. And then with COVID, I stopped working nights because we really contracted our hours, and, I'm not going back to nights. If there's something happens that I need to, but right now I do bedtime with my kids every night, and they're 2, 4, and 6. I'm not gonna miss that. That's not gonna last much longer. At some point they're not gonna need me, and then fine, I'll go back to working nights. But right now they're my priority. The thing that we don't realize is those moments. I mean, there's numerous moments. My ex-wife now used to say, I don't put my expensive makeup before I get physically in the car on the way to the restaurant, right? So because I used to say, oh, I'm sorry, I got a call, I got to go. Or I got to do this, or I'm taking phone calls, or I got a dissection, a partner needs help,
and I was doing heart transplants, a lot of it was sort of this constant roller coaster of unpredictable schedule. But we are all just another bozo on the bus, and all these little things get chipped away, right? This time you lose with your family, it chips. You don't think it's the analogy was heart failure. Every time you have a heart failure episode, you think you get back to where you were, but you don't. You just get to where you were a little bit lower than before. So that's the same concept. Every time you cancel those family obligations, you miss the play, you miss this, you don't take care of yourself, it chips away until you hit the rock bottom. And that's the concept of this chronic disease, where when you hit this acute moment, and the burnout, the anxiety are acute moments where you just can't function with this chronic problem anymore.
Yeah, one of my partners said, when I had a pre-K play to go to, and I knew, when my son was in that play last year, he got off the stage and sat in our laps and watched his friends in the play. So we didn't even watch him. So when it came up next year, I was like, do I take off half a day and miss out on that revenue to see him not even stand on stage? And one of my partners said, once you start saying no to this, you're just going to keep saying no to everything. You got to see to things like this. You don't miss this stuff. Because it's going to be very easy to keep saying no to everything.
And then people normalize this stuff. Oh, I'm a heart surgeon, so I need to be like that. I mean, that's what I did. I normalized my behavior, the way I was angry or the way I was sort of anxious. So you normalize and you accept stuff, right? And that's the danger, I think.
So some of it comes from this pressure to produce, right? In American healthcare, we often feel like we're revenue generating machines. Like when you buy an ice cream shop, the ice cream machines are what generates revenue. So when someone buys an ice cream shop, that's what they're buying. When someone buys a medical practice or a hospital, they're buying us, right? We're the revenue generating machines. So, but in the Canadian healthcare, right? You're Canadian. So the Canadian healthcare system is mostly socialized. So do physicians there still feel that same pressure to produce?
Absolutely. So that's a different conversation, but there's a lot of different pressure. Well, first, this pressure of producing and the financial aspects of healthcare, that's all brand new. It's common to US and Canada, but 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you just treated patients. I mean, the Mayo brothers were working with zero salary every year to take care of patients, right? So this whole concept of producing and percentages, that's when the system got taken over by, that's a personal opinion, but by administrators and MBAs and where hospitals became businesses, right? And that's the reality we're in. Now, to that point about Canadian versus US system, I think that the challenges are similar, but the accessibility becomes way harder in Quebec and in Canada. There are over 2,000 people waiting for heart surgery right now at home, So that's something that we don't see in the US. You need heart surgery, you get it within a month at the most, and so that's one. Now, the government pays your salary, right? So there's a lot of competition between physicians for access to the operating room, the better, more paying cases, the better, sort of more paying revenue generating patients. So between them, there's a lot, and there's a certain amount of spots for patients too, right, in the hospital. So if you take one or two patients that are too high risk in your practice, you sort of clog up the system for your other partners to do. So it creates a bit of resentment between people. There's always a competition of salary. Nobody gets a fixed salary, but it gets paid by the X amount of patients and reimbursed by the government. And that's another issue, because the government over the last 10 years hired a lot of people, like usually they're retired doctors, that will look into what people are billing. So oftentimes you'll get an email 3 months later after receiving the money, oh, we're just taking out $5,000 off your account because you were over sort of paid for that. And I'm like, what, why is that? So, and if you don't work, you don't get paid too, right? So for example, I was in Montreal for probably 2 years, a couple of years ago, it was inevitable when there was a snowstorm, or it was sort of the holidays, or there was like the flu season. We were missing a lot of nurses. They would go from 6 ORs to like 2 ORs. And then you would get a call in the morning, say, okay, Simon, this is your day today, but your 2 cases are canceled. So the patients would get home. And I had about 30% cancellation rate. So I knew exactly when there's a little snowstorm, which is pretty frequent in Montreal, I would just walk towards the coffee shop and wait for the call. And they would just call me and say, well, today your day is canceled. And so much that people don't know that, but so much that the patients have a little kind of star or 2 stars between their name, and that right next to their name, because the patients are giving a lunch, they go back home. And when they come back to the surgery, they have a star. They've been canceled once, right? So if your patient hasn't been canceled, your partner gets the room, you know what I mean? So it creates this sort of constant management, and it creates a lot of resentment between people. So the stresses are there. They're just a bit different.
A little different. Interesting. We discussed the high intensity life that you used to have. But reading about your hobbies, it sounds like this has been replaced with other high intensity activities, right? So again, from your bio, so you're working as you're still a cardiac surgeon, but you're now taking acting classes, you play tennis, you swim, you bike. And now, what we're talking about now is you're building a coaching business to mentor professionals in high intensity professions, right? So,
right.
It sounds like there's kind of replacing one for the other.
All of this together,
So what does a typical week look like for you?
Right. So, a typical week would be probably 3. Well, first I found I am working in the system with partners now that we all have the same mentality. We've created a lot of free time at work with our employees, so people that work in secretaries and things, where usually by noon or 11 on Friday, everybody's out of the office. So we created that. That's sacred. You can't take that away, right? So you can't. But the turnover is great. The people don't go. Now the department has went through a whole big rearrangement, and it's a hospital in Montana within Intermountain System. It's a pretty big system. Where we all think the same, family first, balance. So we have about 10 to 12 days off a month, so full-time is 18 days. So that doesn't mean we don't go to meetings and things and virtually assist to things, but we are on call 10 days each a month. We're 3 of us. So, so when we're not there, unless you need advice and things, we can't get reach. It's, so you take that time off. And so typical week when I work at work, now is probably 3 or 4 days of 1 case every day. Sometimes I'll add a case. Most times I don't. And usually Friday afternoon, it becomes more of an administrative day. And then I have a clinic somewhere in there. So it's more controlled. Usually by 2, I'm done. If I have a quick case, I'm done by 10:30, 11 in the morning. So it's not that the 3 or 4 cases where you start at 6:30 and you're done by 7 or 8, but like I was at the Mayo Clinic. So the volume's a little less. And when I'm on that time off, that's where when I'm at work, I'm efficient. When I'm on that time off, that's where I work on the other things that sort of allow me to keep the balance and things. The acting classes are sort of hit and miss. It's really interesting, the science behind acting. And that's what really triggered me to, you read scripts. Like in school, you analyze stuff. And that really got me outside of my head to sort of read scripts and learn things and sort of different ways to present things and different ways to learn how to be an actor. So it was really interesting to just get out of and I don't really do acting auditions for a few things, but nothing serious, so to speak.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But if you bring the same intensity to that, then we'll be seeing you on the big screen soon.
That's right.
Or maybe Netflix.
That's right. Maybe Netflix. But, the point is trying to not have all of this, because I remember one of the big things for me was to realize that work wasn't working, right? But because I had put in so much intensity into work, the pie was solely around work. When that falls off, I mean, so you lose all your sort of your grounds and things. So now, if the acting doesn't work, I don't really give a, if I play tennis and I suck that day, that's okay. So there's like there's a bit of more balance to this. So
tell us about the book.
Yeah, the book is really about, it's a bit of a journal that I've started during this process, following a coach and following a personal coach. And then it became more of a self-expression of things that were going well, not going well. And then as I started to speak about those things, then people came to treat their story. So we describe, to tell their story. So we describe basically these acute moments like burnout, anxiety, alcoholism, personal things as acute problems in a more of a chronic disease where if you don't fix the bottom line, basically, you're just constantly back into these cycles where you can, wake up and you're 10 years out, you've been to HR, some of these coaching stuff. And so the disease is really described as with three poles, like any other disease: the host, like the person that's contracted it. And then we describe the traits, the characters, the perfectionism, the things that are important for the person that's within this, the environment. So the pressure, the system, the cases, the finances around it, and things like that. And then finally, the ways the what, right? So the ways you've adapted yourself within those things. And we describe this as a triangle, the epidemiologic triangle, where if one of those things doesn't sort of fit together, when they all come together, that's where you express the disease. And if you want to change something, then you got to change the interaction between those things.
Love it. Love it. So what's the title of the book?
Healthcare Anonymous.
Healthcare Anonymous.
It is also translated, and it's a bit of a wink to Alcoholic Anonymous, which I had to read at some point. But it describes, it does describe a bit the shades of gray of what depression and anxiety looks like. We think it's a bit. If you read the Alcoholic Anonymous book, there's a story about the guy that's on the street with the paper bag, but most of the stories are really milder sort of things. The woman that drinks at 9 a.m. with her kids at home, the guy that goes back from work and stops by the bar, and it's sort of functional people. So it describes these stories of shades of people that have developed these maladaptive process within the system. And it's really an open heart dissection of people's stories. I mean, a good third of the book is really testimonies. Great.
Well, one final question. Throughout the interview, I've seen this thing behind you. If you turn around, it's like a stair. Is that a stairwell?
Yeah.
And are those stairs alternating? Like what is going on back there? I'm sorry for those, because this is primarily a podcast, but now I have a YouTube channel. What is that? Can you just explain what we're seeing there?
Yeah. Hold on. There you go. So the house has 4 stories, right? So okay. It's a new house. We just moved. Actually, it's kind of empty. But the last floor is where the gym is, and it gives access to the top rooftop of the house. So it's like it looks like a firefighter stairwell. It goes straight up,
Okay.
And it goes to, like, on the left, there's a gym. And then on the right, there's a door to the rooftop. So it's like it's a special access, but it's probably safer to go up than to go down.
Yeah. Bit of a liability. Well, especially after a workout when you're.
I told my 9-year-old boy, you can't get up there. And my wife and I've reminded ourselves to take her socks off on the way down, because that's usually a pretty slippery sort of neurosurgeon type concept. Yeah.
All right. Well, Healthcare Anonymous, Simon Maltais, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
That was Dr. Bradley Block at the Physician's Guide to Doctoring. He can be found at physiciansguidetodoctoring.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a question for a previous guest or have an idea for a future episode, send a comment on the webpage. Also, please be sure to leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. We'll see you next time on the Physician's Guide to Doctoring.